The safe wasn't just open. It was destroyed. Scarlett Vaughn stood frozen in the doorway of her Manhattan apartment, her fingers still wrapped around the strap of her bag, her breath caught somewhere between confusion and something far more dangerous. The steel door of the safe hung slightly crooked, like it had been forced open in a hurry, but not carelessly. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were looking for. And they found it. Every single dollar. $800,000. Gone. The silence in the apartment felt unnatural. Too clean. Too still. Like something had already happened. And the room was just waiting for her to catch up. Scarlett stepped forward slowly, her heels echoing against the marble floor. Her eyes scanned the room, not for chaos, but for intention. Nothing else was touched. Not the MacBook on the table, and not the Cartier watch resting beside it. Not even the drawer where she kept emergency cash. Only the safe, only the money. That's when her phone buzzed. A single notification, email. From Mom. Scarlett stared at the screen for a long second before opening it. 3 lines, that was all. You always thought you were smarter than us. Consider this your lesson. Don't try to find us. Attached, a photo, her mother, her sister Madison, and a glass of champagne raised in the air. Behind them, a private villa, ocean view, Hawaii. Scarlett didn't react right away, didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't even sit down. She just stood there, staring at the image, as if her mind was slowly aligning pieces that had never quite made sense before. Her sister's sudden obsession with luxury, her mother's strange legal questions last month, on that conversation about family trust. It wasn't random. It was planned. Scarlett walked to the window, the Manhattan skyline stretching endlessly in front of her, cold and indifferent. Somewhere below, a black Mercedes passed through traffic, headlights cutting through the late afternoon light. Everything out there was still moving, still normal. But inside, everything had shifted. Her phone buzzed again, another message. This time, from Madison. Relax, you never needed that money anyway. A pause, then another message. Try not to be boring for once. Scarlett read it, once, twice, then locked her phone, and finally, she smiled, not out of denial, not out of shock, but because something inside her had just clicked. They thought they had taken everything. They thought she was the victim. They thought this was over. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly know, was that the money they stole was never really hers to lose. And in that moment, standing alone in that silent apartment, Scarlett wasn't thinking about what she had lost. She was thinking about exactly how badly they had just destroyed themselves. Scarlett Vaughn wasn't always this calm. There was a time, years ago, when something like this would have shattered her completely. When betrayal didn't feel like strategy. It felt personal. When silence meant pain, not control. Back then, she still believed family meant protection. She knew better now. Her apartment overlooked the Hudson, the late afternoon light stretching across the glass walls, reflecting a version of her that most people never really saw. To the outside world, Scarlett was quiet, reserved. A woman who kept to herself, worked too much, and avoided unnecessary attention. To her family, she was something else entirely. The difficult one, the unstable one, the one who didn't fit. Scarlett walked slowly toward the kitchen, setting her bag down beside the counter. Her MacBook still sat open from the night before. Spreadsheets and encrypted files quietly waiting where she left them. Unfinished work. Important work. Work no one in her family even knew existed. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Madison, followed by a flood of social media posts. Scarlett didn't open them immediately. She already knew what they would show. Madison standing by an infinity pool. Her mother smiling like nothing had ever been wrong. Luxury, freedom, victory. Or at least, that's what they believed. Scarlett reached for a glass of water and taking a slow sip as her mind moved. Not emotionally, but analytically. Because this wasn't the first time her family had taken something from her. Just the biggest. When she was 23, her mother had borrowed her savings to cover a failed investment. When she was 28, Madison had used her name to secure a loan she never intended to repay. And every time, Scarlett had been told the same thing. It's family. You'll understand one day. Don't make this bigger than it is. She had listened. She had forgiven. She had adjusted. Until adjusting became disappearing. Scarlett walked back into the living room, her eyes briefly landing on the shattered safe again. This time, she didn't feel shock. Just clarity. Because this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't desperation. This was escalation. And for the first time, she wasn't going to absorb it. Her phone lit up again, the screen now filled with Madison's latest post. A caption: "Sometimes you have to leave toxic people behind to live your best life." Scarlett stared at it for a moment, then let out a quiet breath. Not hurt, not anger. Something colder, more precise. Because they thought this was about money. They thought they had taken power. But what they didn't understand was that Scarlett had spent years building something far more dangerous than savings. She closed her laptop slowly, her reflection faintly visible on the dark screen. Because the woman they thought they had just destroyed was never the woman they thought they knew. And while they were celebrating what they had stolen, Scarlett was already calculating exactly how she would take everything back, without ever chasing them. Scarlett didn't call the police. She didn't call the bank either. Instead, she sat down slowly at her desk, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. Not hesitating, but aligning. Because deep down, she already knew how they did it. Her mother wasn't careless. Eleanor Vaughn had spent a lifetime learning how to move through systems without raising suspicion. She didn't break rules. She bent them just enough to make everything look legitimate. Scarlett opened her laptop, pulling up her financial dashboard. The interface loaded smoothly, rows of data appearing like quiet witnesses to what had already happened. Then, she found it. A transfer. Large, clean. Executed 2 days ago. Authorized. Scarlett's eyes narrowed slightly. Authorized under her name. She clicked into the details. Digital signature. Verified. Time-stamped. Her lips pressed together. Power of attorney, she said quietly to herself. It was the only explanation that made sense. 3 weeks ago, her mother had insisted on helping her organize legal documents. Said it was for emergency situations. Said it was just a precaution. Scarlett had signed it. Not because she trusted her completely, but because she didn't expect this. Another click, another file. The routing path appeared. The money hadn't gone directly overseas. No, it moved first through a domestic account, an LLC. Scarlett leaned back slightly. There it was. Tristan. He had set it up. A shell company, clean enough to pass initial checks, temporary enough to disappear when needed. From there, the funds were split. Multiple transactions, layered, carefully timed, not random, not impulsive. This was structured. Scarlett's gaze hardened just slightly, because this wasn't just theft anymore. This was laundering, and that changed everything. Her phone buzzed again, Another photo. This time, Madison standing on a yacht, the ocean stretching endlessly behind her, her caption simple. New beginnings feel expensive, because they are. Scarlett didn't react. She just watched. Because what Madison saw as freedom, Scarlett saw as evidence. Every post, every location tag, every timestamp. They weren't hiding. They were documenting, and that was their first mistake. Scarlett opened another window, pulling up a secure system, one far removed from her personal accounts. The interface was different. Restricted, encrypted, not something her family even knew existed. She entered her credentials, paused for just a second, then logged in. The screen loaded, and with it, a different kind of reality. One where that $800,000 wasn't just money. It was something far more dangerous. Scarlett exhaled slowly, her posture relaxing, not from relief, but from certainty. Because now there was no doubt, no confusion, no hesitation. They didn't just steal from her. They crossed into something they couldn't control, something they didn't even understand. And that was a mistake they wouldn't survive quietly. Because while they believed they had executed the perfect plan, they had just stepped directly into a system designed to destroy people exactly like them. This didn't start with the money. It never did. Scarlett leaned back in her chair, her eyes drifting away from the glowing screen toward the shattered safe across the room. For a moment, the present faded, and something older surfaced. Something quieter, more familiar. She was 10 years old the first time she understood what it meant to be less in her own home. Madison had broken a neighbor's window during a party. It was careless, loud, obvious. But when the neighbor came knocking, it wasn't Madison who stood at the door. It was Scarlett. "You're older," her mother had said. "Just apologize. Don't make this bigger than it is." Scarlett had done it, because that's what she was taught to do. Fix things that weren't hers, take responsibility that didn't belong to her. And over time, it became normal. At 16, Madison crashed the family car. Scarlett paid for the repairs with money she had saved for college. And at 23, her mother's temporary financial setback became Scarlett's drained savings account. At 28, her credit score dropped overnight because Madison needed just one signature. Every time, the pattern was the same. A problem, a request, a quiet pressure. Then, a consequence Scarlett carried alone. And if she hesitated, if she questioned it, the response came instantly. "You're selfish. You don't understand family. After everything we've done for you." Scarlett closed her eyes briefly, her fingers resting still against the desk. It wasn't just the money. It was the rewriting of reality. The way they made her doubt herself. The way they made her feel guilty for protecting what was hers. And slowly, she stopped resisting, not because she agreed, but because fighting them felt heavier than losing. And Scarlett opened her eyes again, her gaze steady now. Because this was the first time they had taken something she wasn't willing to lose. Not because of the amount, but because of what it represented. Control, authority, truth. Her phone buzzed again, another notification lighting up the screen. This time, it was a video. Madison laughing, her mother beside her, the ocean behind them, carefree, untouched. Scarlett watched it for exactly 3 seconds, then turned the phone face down, because she had seen enough. This wasn't just another moment of being used. This was the final step in a pattern that had lasted her entire life. And patterns, once fully seen, could no longer be ignored. Scarlett stood slowly, walking toward the window again, her reflection calm, composed, almost unrecognizable from the girl she used to be. Because that girl would have cried, would have called, would have begged for explanation. But this version of Scarlett, she understood something far more important. This wasn't betrayal. This was consistency. And now that she finally saw it clearly, she wasn't going to fix it anymore. Because the moment she stopped trying to be the one who held the family together, she became the one who would finally break the cycle they thought would never end. Scarlett didn't rush. That was the difference. While most people would panic, call the bank, call the police, call anyone who might give them a sense of control, Scarlett did none of that, because she wasn't trying to stop what had already happened. She was trying to understand what it meant. Her fingers moved calmly across the keyboard, pulling up a system that didn't belong to her personal life. And the interface was darker, more complex, layered with authentication protocols most people would never recognize. This wasn't banking. This was federal. Scarlett entered her credentials, paused, then pressed enter. The screen shifted, access granted. A new dashboard appeared, one tied to an ongoing investigation she had been working on for months. Case files, transaction logs, international routing patterns, and right there, highlighted in red, the exact same $800,000. Scarlett's eyes didn't widen, didn't flicker. They simply focused. Because now it was undeniable. That money was never just hers. It was flagged, tagged, tracked. Part of a larger operation involving seized cartel assets. Money that had been intentionally placed into controlled environments to monitor illegal movement, and somehow, her family had just inserted themselves into it. Scarlett leaned back slightly, exhaling through her nose. Not shock, not fear. Something colder, more precise. Because this wasn't just theft anymore. This was a federal trigger. Every movement of that money was being watched. Every transfer logged, every account touched, marked. Her phone buzzed again, another notification from Madison. This time, a video call attempt. Scarlett declined it without hesitation. Because she didn't need to hear their voices. She already knew what they were thinking. They believed they had won. They believed they were untouchable. They believed the money was clean. Scarlett reached for her coffee, now cold, taking a slow sip anyway as her mind began to shift gears. Not emotional, strategic. Because now, this wasn't about recovering what was stolen, and that part didn't matter anymore. What mattered was what happened next. She opened a secure message channel and typed a single name. Adrian Cross. No greeting, no explanation. Just one sentence. They took the flagged funds. She stared at the screen for a moment, then hit send. Delivered instantly. Outside, the city continued moving, unaware of what had just been set into motion. Inside, everything had changed. Because her family thought they had escaped. They thought distance protected them. They thought Hawaii meant safety. But they didn't understand the system they had just triggered. They didn't understand how far it reached. And most importantly, they didn't understand Scarlett, because the quiet woman they had spent years underestimating was the one person who knew exactly what would happen next. And then while they were celebrating on a beach thousands of miles away, Scarlett had just activated something that would follow them no matter where they ran. Adrian Cross didn't reply right away. He never did. Scarlett knew that about him. Every message she had ever sent into that system, every update, every flagged transaction was answered the same way. Not with words, with action. Scarlett closed her laptop slowly, the quiet click echoing faintly through the apartment. For a moment, she just stood there, letting the silence settle again. Because now, it wasn't just her problem anymore. Across the city, in a secured federal office far removed from anything personal, Adrian stared at the message on his screen. They took the flagged funds. That was all it said. No emotion, no panic. Which was exactly why it mattered. Adrian leaned back in his chair, his expression sharpening. He pulled up the case file immediately, layers of data unfolding across the multiple monitors. Transaction logs, asset tracking, international alerts. And then, he saw it. The movement. Clean. Precise. Recent. His jaw tightened slightly. Unbelievable, he muttered. Because no one touched flagged funds by accident, not at this scale, not this clean. Which meant one thing. Someone thought they were smarter than the system. He reached for his phone, dialing a secure line. Activate monitoring, he said calmly. Full trace. I want every endpoint flagged. A pause, then. And notify financial crimes. We have movement. Back in Manhattan, Scarlett's phone buzzed once. A response. Not a message. Just a confirmation. Received. That was enough. Scarlett exhaled slowly, Ors walking toward the window again. The sky had darkened slightly now, the city lights beginning to flicker on one by one. Somewhere out there, a chain reaction had just begun. Thousands of miles away, in a private villa overlooking the ocean, Madison laughed as she lifted another glass of champagne. Music played softly in the background, waves crashing gently against the shore. Marcus scrolled through his phone, watching numbers move, accounts shift, everything flowing exactly as he had planned. See, he said confidently. I told you, easy. Madison smiled. She won't even know what hit her. They both laughed, because from where they stood, this was over. But at that exact moment, Marcus's screen flickered. Just slightly. A delay, a hesitation. So small most people wouldn't notice. But Scarlett would have, because that wasn't a glitch. No, that was contact. The system had found them, and once it did, it never let go. Back in her apartment, Scarlett didn't smile, didn't celebrate. She simply watched the city unfold in front of her, her reflection steady in the glass. Because she knew something they didn't. This wasn't about chasing them. This wasn't about confronting them. This was about letting the system do exactly what it was built to do. And it was already working. Because the moment Adrian saw that message, this stopped being a family betrayal and became a federal case that no amount of distance could ever outrun. Hawaii looked perfect in photos. That was the illusion. The villa sat high above the ocean, its glass walls reflecting endless blue skies and sunlight that never seemed to fade. A private infinity pool stretched toward the horizon, blending seamlessly with the sea below. From the outside, it was everything Madison had ever wanted. She stood barefoot on the edge of the pool, her phone raised, capturing the perfect angle. The ocean behind her, the champagne in her hand, the soft wind catching her hair just right. Hold on, she said, adjusting slightly. This one needs to look effortless. Marcus leaned back in a lounge chair, watching her with quiet satisfaction. It already does, he replied. Madison smiled, snapping the photo. Within seconds, it was online. Caption: Sometimes you just have to take what life owes you. Likes began pouring in instantly. Comments, hearts, validation, everything she had chased for years, finally within reach. Or so she thought. Inside the villa, Marcus checked his laptop, the financial dashboard open in front of him. Numbers moved across the screen, balances shifting, accounts stabilizing exactly as planned. Clean, efficient, untouchable. He smirked. "See?" he said, glancing toward Madison. "No alarms, no issues. We're fine." Madison walked inside, setting her phone down on the marble counter. "I told you she wouldn't fight back," she said. "Scarlett's predictable." Marcus nodded. "People like her always are." There was a knock at the door. Soft, almost polite. Madison frowned slightly. "Were we expecting anyone?" Marcus shook his head. "Probably staff." He stood, walking toward the entrance without concern, his movements relaxed, unhurried, because in his mind, everything was under control. He opened the door. No one. Just the ocean breeze pushing lightly against the frame. Marcus stepped forward slightly, scanning the empty walkway. Nothing. He frowned, then closed the door again, dismissing it. Inside, Madison had already returned to her phone, scrolling through the growing attention on her post, her smile widening with every notification. But behind her, on the kitchen counter, Marcus's laptop screen flickered again. Not dramatically, not enough to panic. Just a delay, a fraction of a second, then another. The numbers updated again, but slower this time. Less smooth, less perfect. Marcus didn't notice. Madison didn't care, because they were too busy enjoying the version of reality they believed they had created. But the truth was already shifting beneath them. Thousands of miles away, systems were connecting, tracking, linking, building a map they couldn't see. And with every second that passed, their location became clearer, their actions more defined, or their mistakes more permanent. Back in Manhattan, Scarlett stood by the window, her phone silent in her hand, her expression unchanged. Because she didn't need updates. She didn't need confirmation. She already knew. The moment they touched that money, they stopped being invisible. And paradise was never designed to protect people from consequences. Because while they were busy proving to the world how perfect their lives had become, the system had already begun turning their paradise into the exact place they would be found. The call came just after sunset. Scarlett saw the name flash across her screen and didn't answer right away. Madison. Of course it was. Scarlett let it ring twice, 3 times. Then she picked up. "Wow." Madison's voice came through instantly, light and amused. "You actually answered. I thought you'd be crying somewhere." Scarlett didn't respond. She simply walked toward the window, the city glowing beneath her, steady and untouched. "I got your messages," Scarlett said calmly. Madison laughed. "Good, then you understand." "Do I?" A pause. Not long, but enough. Madison shifted slightly. "Look, Scarlett, don't make this dramatic. You were just sitting on that money anyway. We're actually using it." Scarlett's expression didn't change. "And Hawaii?" she asked. Madison smiled, even though Scarlett couldn't see it. "You should see it here. It's everything you never allowed yourself to have." Scarlett glanced at her reflection in the glass. "Allowed," she repeated softly. Marcus's voice cut in from the background. "Let me talk to her." There was a brief shuffle. Then his tone came through, confident, controlled. "Scarlett," he said, "I'll be direct. We both know you're not going to do anything about this." Scarlett didn't interrupt, because she wanted him to keep talking. "We've already moved most of the funds," he continued. "Spread across accounts, structured properly. There's nothing you can trace back now." Scarlett's eyes narrowed just slightly, not in anger, in focus. "And why are you telling me this?" she asked. Marcus chuckled. Because I want you to understand something. A pause. You lost? Silence. Scarlett let that sit. Let him believe it. Then, did you move everything through the LLC? She asked. Another pause, this one longer. Marcus hesitated, just for a second. Then, yeah, he said. Why? Scarlett leaned lightly against the window, her voice calm, almost curious. And you broke it into smaller transfers? Of course, Marcus replied. We're not amateurs. Scarlett closed her eyes briefly. Not from stress, from confirmation. Because in less than 30 seconds, he had just said everything she needed, every detail, every mistake, every step, and he had given it willingly. Scarlett opened her eyes again. Thank you, she said quietly. Marcus frowned. For what? Scarlett didn't answer. She simply pulled the phone away from her ear and ended the call. No goodbye, no warning, nothing. Across the ocean, Marcus stared at his phone, confused. What was that? Madison asked. Marcus shook his head. I don't know. But something about the way Scarlett said those two words didn't feel right. Back in Manhattan, Scarlett lowered her phone slowly, her expression steady, controlled, because now there was no uncertainty left. No missing pieces, no assumptions. Only evidence, and more importantly, proof. Because while Marcus thought he was proving how untouchable he was, he had just handed Scarlett everything she needed to make sure he wouldn't be. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He told himself it was nothing. Just a strange call. Just Scarlett being different. But something about it lingered. The way she didn't argue, didn't panic, didn't beg. That wasn't who she used to be. And Marcus knew something most people didn't. People like Scarlett only changed when they had a reason. He sat on the edge of the bed, his laptop open, the glow of the screen cutting through the dark room. Madison was asleep behind him, her breathing steady, undisturbed. Still believing everything was fine. Marcus refreshed the dashboard again, and the numbers were still there, still intact, still moving. But slower now, just slightly. He frowned. That's weird, he muttered. He opened another window, checking the LLC accounts. Everything looked normal, at first, then a delay. One transaction sat pending longer than it should have. Marcus clicked into it, processing. No error, no rejection, just waiting. His jaw tightened. That doesn't make sense. He leaned forward, typing quickly, trying to push another transfer through. Smaller amount, under 10,000, cleaner, safer. Or so he thought. He hit confirm. The screen paused. Longer this time, then updated. Completed. Marcus exhaled slightly. Okay, he whispered. Still working. But what he didn't see was what happened behind that confirmation. Because that transfer, that exact amount, had just triggered something else. Back in a secured federal system, the pattern lit up instantly. Structured transactions, multiple accounts, rapid movement. Adrian's screen filled with alerts. There it is, he said quietly. Because this wasn't just movement anymore. This was laundering behavior. Clear, documented, unavoidable. Back in Hawaii, Marcus leaned back in his chair, trying to shake the unease settling in his chest. It's fine, he told himself. Everything's fine. Madison stirred slightly behind him. What time is it? She murmured. Late, he replied. Go back to sleep. She did. Because she trusted him. Because she believed in the version of reality he had built for her. Marcus stared at the screen again. Another delay. Another hesitation. Small, but consistent. And now, impossible to ignore. Because something had changed. Not dramatically, not loudly, but enough. He reached for his phone, scrolling through the accounts again, checking every detail, every number, every movement. Trying to find the problem, trying to regain control. But control was already gone. Thousands of miles away, Scarlett stood quietly in her apartment, her phone resting untouched beside her. She didn't need to check anything, didn't need updates, because she already knew exactly what Marcus had just done. He had tried to be careful, he had tried to be smart, but in doing so, he had followed a pattern, and patterns were exactly what the system was built to catch. Scarlett closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, her reflection steady in the glass. Because now, it wasn't about if they would be found. It was about when. And in the moment Marcus tried to fix the situation, he unknowingly locked himself into a pattern that guaranteed he would never escape it. By morning, the narrative had already changed. Not the truth, just the story people believed. Scarlett woke to a flood of notifications, messages, tags, missed calls. But she didn't rush to check them. She already knew where this was going, because Madison never stayed quiet. She performed. Scarlett sat at the edge of her bed, her phone in hand, and finally opened social media. There it was, a video. Madison sitting by the ocean, her eyes slightly red, her voice soft, carefully controlled. "I don't usually do this," she began, "but I think people deserve to know the truth." Scarlett watched, expressionless. "She's been controlling our family for years," Madison continued, "using money to manipulate us, to make us feel small." A pause, a tear, perfectly timed. "We just wanted freedom." The comments flooded in instantly. Support, sympathy, anger, not toward Madison, toward Scarlett. Scarlett scrolled slowly, reading without reacting. She sounds toxic. Money changes people. Family comes first. The words blurred together. Predictable, simple, effective. Scarlett placed the phone down beside her, staring ahead for a moment. Because this was the second part of the plan. Not just taking the money, controlling the narrative. Across the ocean, Madison refreshed her screen again, watching the numbers climb. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments, validation, exactly what she needed. "She's not even responding," Madison said, glancing at Marcus. "That just proves my point." Marcus nodded, but his attention wasn't fully there. His laptop sat open beside him, the same subtle delays still creeping into every transaction. He didn't mention it, not yet. Because as long as Madison believed everything was fine, he had time. Back in Manhattan, Scarlett stood and walked toward the window, the city already awake, moving forward without hesitation. Her phone buzzed again, a message this time, from an unknown number. "She's lying." Scarlett paused, then opened it. Another message followed. "I know what really happened." No name, no explanation. Just certainty. Scarlett's eyes narrowed slightly, because this was new, not part of the pattern, not something she had predicted. Across the room, her laptop screen lit up automatically, a secure notification appearing without sound. Incoming update. Scarlett didn't move immediately. She looked at the message on her phone again, then at the screen. Because suddenly, there was another layer, another variable. And in situations like this, unexpected variables mattered. Scarlett stepped forward slowly, her focus sharpening. Because while Madison was busy controlling the story, and Marcus was trying to control the money, something else had just entered the equation, something neither of them saw coming. And for the first time since this began, Scarlett realized she might not be the only one watching them fall. Scarlett didn't ignore the message, but she didn't respond either. Not yet. Instead, she turned her attention to the laptop, the secure notification still waiting. The screen glowed softly, almost patiently, as if it already knew what she would find. She clicked. The system loaded quickly, faster than before, because now it wasn't just tracking. It was escalating. Multiple flags had been triggered overnight. Transaction patterns confirmed, account clusters identified. Movement paths mapped across 3 separate financial channels. Scarlett's eyes moved calmly across the data, then stopped. Location confirmed. Maui. Villa coordinates matched. Her fingers rested lightly on the keyboard. Because this was the moment where everything shifted from observation to action. Across the country, Adrian stood in front of a large digital board. The case now expanded across multiple screens. Red lines connected accounts, names, timestamps, each one forming a network that had grown far beyond a simple theft. "They're not slowing down," someone said behind him. Adrian didn't look away. "No," he replied. "They're panicking." That mattered, and because panic created mistakes, and mistakes created evidence. He tapped the screen lightly. "Freeze all secondary accounts. Flag every transaction over 5,000. I want real-time alerts." A pause, then, "And notify local authorities in Maui, discreetly." Back in Hawaii, Marcus refreshed his screen again. This time, the delay didn't disappear. One account locked, then another. His expression tightened. No, he muttered. He tried another transfer. Denied. Madison walked in, still holding her phone, her smile fading slightly. "What's wrong?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. "Because this wasn't part of the plan. Just a delay," he said finally. "Nothing serious." But his voice didn't match his words. Madison frowned. "You said everything was clean." "It is," he snapped. Too quickly, too sharply. And that's when she felt it. Not the problem itself, but the shift. Because Marcus was no longer in control. Back in Manhattan, Scarlett's phone buzzed again. The unknown number. "I told you. She's lying." A new message followed. "She's not even telling you everything." Scarlett stared at the screen, because now there were 2 stories unfolding. The one her sister was showing the world, and the one someone else was trying to reveal. Scarlett typed one word. "Who?" She didn't send it immediately, because timing mattered. Everything mattered now. She glanced back at her laptop, the system updating in real time. Accounts freezing, movement slowing, the net tightening. Then she hit send and leaned back slightly, her expression calm, focused, ready. Because whatever came next wouldn't just expose her family, it would expose everything. And as the system began closing in from every direction, Scarlett realized the real truth might be even bigger than the betrayal she thought she understood. The first real crack didn't happen quietly. It happened in public. Madison didn't expect it. She walked into the luxury boutique with the same confidence she had carried all week. Chin high, phone in hand, sunglasses resting perfectly on her face. The staff greeted her politely, the way they greeted anyone who looked like they belonged there. And Madison believed she did. "I'll take this one," she said casually, pointing to a white designer dress displayed near the window. The associate smiled. Of course. Everything felt normal, expected, controlled. Until it wasn't. At the register, Madison handed over her card without hesitation, already half turning her phone to capture a quick video for her followers. "Just a little retail therapy," she murmured, smiling. The machine beeped, paused, then declined. The associate blinked. "I'm sorry, it didn't go through." Madison frowned slightly, forcing a small laugh. "That's not possible. Try again." The second attempt took longer. Another pause, another beep. Declined. This time, the silence around her shifted. Subtle, but noticeable. Madison's smile tightened. "Use the other one." She handed over a second card, then a third. Each one, the same result. Declined. Her fingers stiffened slightly around her phone. Behind her, someone shifted. A quiet whisper. A glance. Marcus stood a few feet away, his expression no longer relaxed. Something was wrong. And now, it wasn't just on a screen. It was happening here, in front of people. Madison's voice lowered. "What's going on?" The associate maintained her composure. "It appears the accounts may be restricted." Restricted. The word hit harder than declined. Marcus stepped forward quickly. "There must be a mistake." He pulled out his phone, opening the account dashboard. The loading circle spun, longer than usual. Then, error. He tried again. Same result. Behind them, the quiet attention in the store had shifted fully toward them now. Not obvious, but undeniable. Madison felt it. The shift from admiration to curiosity to something else. Her chest tightened slightly. "This is ridiculous," she said, louder now. "Fix it." But no one moved, because no one could. Back in Manhattan, Scarlett watched the system update in real time. Primary accounts, frozen. Secondary accounts, restricted. Need transaction permissions, suspended. Her expression didn't change, because this was expected, necessary, precise. Her phone buzzed again, the unknown number. They're starting to feel it. Scarlett stared at the message, then at the screen, because now the illusion had begun to collapse. Not all at once, but piece by piece, exactly the way it needed to. Back in the boutique, Madison lowered her phone slowly, her reflection staring back at her from the mirrored wall. For the first time, she didn't look confident. She looked exposed. And Marcus? He wasn't reassuring her anymore. He was trying to understand something he couldn't fix. Because the moment the money stopped moving, their perfect life stopped working. And the reality they had been ignoring finally started catching up to them. Marcus didn't speak until they got back to the villa. Not in the car. Not when Madison kept asking questions. Not even when she slammed the door behind them, her voice sharp with panic. "What just happened?" she demanded. Marcus walked straight past her, heading for the laptop, his movements fast now, no longer smooth, no longer confident. "I told you," he said, his voice tight. "It's a delay." "That wasn't a delay," Madison snapped. "All the cards, every account?" Marcus didn't answer. Because now, he couldn't lie to himself anymore. He opened the system again, fingers moving quickly, pulling up every account, every transfer, every layer he had built. And what he saw didn't make sense. Funds still existed. Balances still showed. But access was tightening, like something was closing in. Marcus swallowed. No. He clicked into another account, initiating a transfer. 10,000, safe amount, controlled. He hit confirm, processing, longer, then completed. Marcus exhaled sharply. "See?" he said quickly, "still working." But his hands weren't steady anymore, and Madison saw it. "You're not sure?" she said quietly. Marcus ignored her, already typing again. Another transfer. Different account, different path. Smaller this time, faster. He hit confirm, processing. Then, flagged. A small red notification appeared on the corner of the screen. Marcus froze. "What is that?" Madison whispered. "Nothing," he said too quickly. "Just a system check." But even as he said it, another alert appeared, then another. Each one small, each one subtle. But together, impossible to ignore. Back in the federal system, Adrian watched the screen light up. "There it is," he said calmly. Pattern confirmed. Multiple structured transactions, rapid distribution, clear intent. He didn't raise his voice, didn't react emotionally, because this was exactly what they were waiting for. "Lock the remaining pathways," he ordered, "and log every attempt." Back in Hawaii, Marcus leaned closer to the screen, his breathing uneven now. He refreshed again. This time, one account disappeared, not the money, just access. Gone. "What did you do?" Madison asked, her voice rising. "I didn't do anything," Marcus snapped. But the truth was, he had. Every move he made to fix the situation was making it worse. Because he wasn't just moving money anymore. He was creating a pattern, and patterns could be tracked, predicted, proven. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, his confidence cracking visibly now. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. But deep down, it did. He just didn't want to see it. Madison stepped back slightly, her fear no longer hidden. "Marcus, are we in trouble?" He didn't answer, because for the first time, he didn't have control, and without control, there was no plan, no illusion, no escape, only consequences, waiting. Because the more Marcus tried to outsmart the system, the more clearly he proved exactly how guilty he really was. Madison was the first to break. Not Marcus, not yet. She stood in the middle of the living room, her phone shaking slightly in her hand, her composure finally cracking under the weight of something she could no longer control. "Call her," she said. Marcus didn't look up from the laptop. "No." "Marcus," her voice sharpened, panic rising. "Call her." "I said no," he snapped, because calling Scarlett meant something he wasn't ready to admit. It meant they needed her. And Marcus wasn't ready to lose that illusion. But Madison already had. She dialed, before he could stop her. Back in Manhattan, Scarlett watched her phone light up. Madison. She didn't answer immediately. She let it ring, once, twice, 3 times. Then, she picked up. "Scarlett." Madison's voice was different now. Not confident, not mocking, shaking. "There's a problem." Scarlett didn't respond right away. She walked slowly toward the window, her reflection calm, distant. "I know," she said. Marcus stepped closer, grabbing the phone from Madison. "What did you do?" he demanded. Scarlett didn't react to his tone. "Nothing," she replied. "That's not possible," Marcus snapped. "Everything was working. Now it's not." Scarlett tilted her head slightly, her voice almost thoughtful. "Strange how that happens," she said. Madison stepped closer again, her voice breaking. "Please, just tell us what's going on." There it was. The shift, from control to desperation. Scarlett closed her eyes briefly, not out of emotion, but recognition. Because this was the moment everything reversed. "You moved the money," she said calmly. "Yes," Marcus replied. "You broke it into smaller transactions?" "Yes." "You used multiple accounts?" A pause. "Yes." Scarlett exhaled slowly. "Then, you shouldn't have done that." Silence. Heavy, unavoidable. Marcus's voice lowered. "Why?" Scarlett opened her eyes, her gaze steady, unshaken. "Because that's exactly what triggers the system. Another pause. Longer this time. What system? Madison whispered. Scarlett didn't answer immediately. She let the question sit, let it grow, let it settle, because the answer would change everything. You didn't steal from me, she said finally. Marcus frowned. What are you talking about? Scarlett's voice didn't rise, didn't sharpen. But something in it shifted, something final. That money, she continued, was part of an active federal investigation. The silence on the other end was absolute. Madison's breath caught. Marcus didn't speak, because for the first time, they understood. Not fully, not yet, but enough. Enough to feel it, the weight, the mistake, the consequences. Scarlett looked out at the city again, her reflection steady in the glass, because now, they weren't asking for control anymore. They were asking for survival, or in the moment they realized who they had really stolen from, was the moment they understood there was no way out of what they had just started. The silence didn't end. It stretched. Heavy. Breathing on the other end of the call became the only sound, uneven, shallow, uncertain. Madison was the first to speak. "You're lying," she whispered, but even she didn't believe it. Scarlett didn't argue, didn't defend herself, because the truth didn't need volume, it only needed time. Marcus finally found his voice. No, that doesn't make sense," he said, pacing now. "If that was federal, it wouldn't just be sitting in a private account." Scarlett leaned lightly against the window, her voice calm, almost detached. "It wasn't just sitting," she said. "It was being watched." Another pause. Marcus stopped moving. "What do you mean, watched?" Scarlett didn't rush. "They track movement," she continued. "Patterns, behavior. Anyone who touches it becomes part of the investigation." Madison let out a small, broken sound. "No." Scarlett closed her eyes briefly. Because now, they were starting to understand. Not the full scope, but enough. Marcus's voice dropped, quieter now. "And us?" Scarlett opened her eyes. "Yes," she said. That single word collapsed everything. Madison sank down onto the couch, her phone slipping slightly in her grip. "This can't be happening." Marcus ran both hands through his hair, his composure gone now. "Why didn't you say anything?" he demanded. Scarlett didn't hesitate. "You didn't ask." That hit harder than anything else, because it was true. They never asked. They assumed. They took. They justified. And now, they were facing something they couldn't manipulate. Marcus paced again, faster this time. Okay, we can fix this," he said. "We'll just move the rest, return it, whatever they need." "No," Scarlett said. Not loud, but final. Marcus stopped. "What do you mean, no?" Scarlett's gaze hardened just slightly. "You already triggered it," she said. "The moment you started structuring transactions, it escalated." Madison shook her head, tears forming now. "Scarlett, please, you have to help us." Scarlett didn't respond right away, because this was the moment she had imagined so many times. Not revenge, not satisfaction, and just clarity. "You took everything from me," Scarlett said quietly. Madison sobbed. "We didn't know." "You didn't care to know," Scarlett corrected. Silence. Again. But this time, it was different, because there was no argument left. No defense, no illusion, only truth. Marcus looked at the phone, his voice barely controlled. "What happens now?" Scarlett looked out at the city one more time, the lights steady, endless, unaffected. "Then," she answered, "you wait." "For what?" Madison whispered. Scarlett's expression didn't change. For them. The line went completely still, because now there was nothing left to misunderstand, nothing left to deny, only time and consequences. Because the moment they finally understood the truth, they realized they weren't dealing with Scarlett anymore. They were waiting for something far worse to arrive. They didn't sleep. Not Madison. Not Marcus. The villa that once felt like a dream now felt unfamiliar. Too quiet. Too exposed. Like every wall was watching them. Madison sat on the couch, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, staring at the same screen without really seeing it. Notifications still came in. Likes, comments, messages. But they meant nothing now. None of it felt real anymore. Do something, she said quietly. Marcus didn't respond. He stood by the window, looking out at the dark ocean, his reflection staring back at him instead of the horizon. For the first time since this started, he had no plan, no angle, no control. I am doing something, he muttered. But even he knew. He wasn't. Madison shook her head, her voice rising. You said this was safe. You said you knew what you were doing. Marcus turned sharply. I did. Then why is everything locked? She snapped. Why can't we access anything? He didn't answer, because every answer led to the same place. He had made a mistake. A real one. Madison stood up, Bose. I'm pacing now, her panic building. We need to leave. We need to go somewhere else. Marcus let out a bitter laugh. Go where? Anywhere, she said. Just not here. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, he saw fear. Not frustration, not entitlement. Fear. We're already in it, he said quietly. That stopped her, because something in his voice was different. Madison swallowed. What does that mean? Marcus hesitated. Then, it means we're already being watched. The words landed heavily. Madison stepped back slightly. No. Marcus nodded slowly. Every move, every transfer, everything. Madison's hands began to shake. Scarlett said they were tracking patterns. She's right, Marcus said. Silence filled the room. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that presses in, that forces you to feel everything at once. Madison sank back down, her voice breaking. We didn't mean for this to happen. Marcus didn't respond, because intention didn't matter anymore. Only action, only consequence. A small voice came from the hallway. Mom? Madison turned. Liam stood there, half awake, holding his blanket, his eyes confused but aware. Why are you crying? Madison rushed over, kneeling in front of him. It's nothing, baby. Go back to sleep. Liam hesitated, then said quietly, Grandma said we wouldn't have to worry if Aunt Scarlett wasn't around anymore. The room went still. Completely still. Marcus didn't move. Madison froze. Because that sentence was something they couldn't take back, something they couldn't explain, something far worse than money. Madison looked at Marcus slowly. What did she mean by that? Marcus didn't answer, because now everything had changed. Not just legally, but morally, irreversibly. Because in that moment, it wasn't just about stolen money anymore. It was about a truth so dark that even they couldn't pretend they were the victims anymore. No one spoke after Liam's words. Not immediately. Because there are moments when silence isn't empty. It's heavy. It carries something too real to interrupt. Madison slowly turned her head toward Marcus. Her face pale, her eyes wide with something deeper than fear. What did he just say? She whispered. Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't. Because for the first time, this wasn't about money. This wasn't about control. This was something darker, something that couldn't be explained away. Liam stood there, confused, holding his blanket tighter. Grandma said it in the kitchen, he added softly. She said we'd be okay if Aunt Scarlett wasn't around. Madison's breath caught. That's not what she meant, she said quickly, almost too quickly. But her voice didn't sound convincing. Marcus stepped back slightly, running a hand through his hair, his thoughts unraveling faster than he could hold them together. Because now, everything was collapsing at once. The money, the system, the truth. And now, this. A sudden knock at the door cut through the silence. Sharp, firm, not like before, not like staff. This was different. Madison froze. Marcus looked toward the door, his chest tightening. Another knock, louder. Open the door, a voice called from outside. Authoritative, controlled, final. Madison's eyes widened. Marcus, he didn't move, because somewhere deep down, he already knew. There was no more time, no more delay, no more fixing this. The knock came again. Then, a voice, clearer now. Federal agents, open the door. The words hit like impact. Madison stepped back, her hands shaking uncontrollably now. No, this isn't happening. Liam looked up at her, confused. Mom? Marcus closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. Because this was it. The moment everything became real. He walked toward the door slowly, each step heavier than the last, like the weight of every decision he had made was pressing down all at once. Behind him, Madison sank onto the couch, her composure completely gone, tears falling freely now. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know. But it didn't matter anymore. What they knew, what they meant, what they believed. None of it mattered now. Marcus reached for the handle, paused, then opened the door. 2 agents stood there, calm, unmoved, prepared. Marcus Cole? One of them asked. Marcus nodded slowly. We need you to come with us. No shouting, no force, just certainty. Behind him, Madison covered her mouth, her entire world collapsing in front of her. Because this was no longer something they could talk their way out of, no longer something they could hide. This was consequence, real, immediate, unavoidable. Because the moment that door opened, everything they thought they controlled was taken from them, and there was nothing left to hold on to but the truth. The villa didn't feel like theirs anymore. Not after the agent stepped inside. Not after the calm, controlled way everything shifted, from private space to official scene in a matter of seconds. Madison sat frozen on the couch, her hands trembling in her lap, her eyes following every movement like she was watching something unfold that she couldn't stop. Marcus stood near the door, no longer resisting, no longer arguing, because there was nothing left to argue with. We'll need access to all devices, one of the agents said calmly. Marcus nodded. Of course they would. The laptops, the phones, the accounts, everything they had used to build their illusion was now evidence. Madison's voice came out barely above a whisper. Am I in trouble too? The agent looked at her, not unkindly, but without softness. That depends on your level of involvement. The answer wasn't comforting. It wasn't meant to be. Liam stood quietly behind her, holding onto the edge of the couch, his small face filled with confusion. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling. Something was wrong, very wrong. Madison reached for him instinctively, pulling him close, her voice shaking. It's going to be okay, she said. But for the first time, She didn't believe her own words. Across the room, Marcus handed over his phone. Unlocked. No hesitation. Because control was gone. Replaced by process. Structured, precise, unavoidable. One of the agents glanced at the screen briefly, then nodded to the other. "We have enough to proceed," he said. Proceed. The word echoed in Madison's mind. Because it didn't sound like a possibility. It sounded like a direction already chosen. Back in Manhattan, Scarlett sat at her desk, the system open in front of her, the case file updating in real time. Status active. Subjects identified. Action in progress. She didn't lean closer, didn't react. Because this was expected. Necessary. Final. Her phone buzzed once. A secure message. Contact established. Situation contained. Scarlett read it, then set the phone down. No smile. No relief. Just stillness. Because this was never about watching them fall. It was about letting the truth reach them, exactly where they stood. Back in Hawaii, Madison looked around the villa. The ocean, the glass walls, the expensive details that once felt like success. Now, they felt temporary, fragile, gone, because none of it had ever belonged to her, not really. Marcus was guided toward the door, not forced, but not free either. And as he stepped outside, the sunlight didn't feel warm anymore. It felt exposed. Madison watched him go, her chest tightening, her world shrinking into something unrecognizable. Because now, there was no escape, no story, no illusion left to hold on to, only consequences, and the quiet understanding that everything they had taken everything from them in return. Because in the end, they didn't lose everything in a single moment. They lost it the second they believed they could take what was never theirs and walk away untouched. The city hadn't changed, but Scarlett had. Morning light spilled across her apartment, soft and steady, touching everything it always had, the glass walls, the quiet order of her space, the untouched coffee resting beside her. For the first time in a long time, nothing felt taken. Nothing felt unsettled. Scarlett stood by the window, her reflection clear, grounded, no longer carrying the weight she had held for years. Because this wasn't about the money anymore. It never really was. Her phone buzzed gently on the table. Not chaos, not noise, just updates. Controlled, measured. She picked it up. A message from Adrian. Charges are moving forward. He won't walk away from this. Scarlett read it once, then placed the phone back down. No reaction, because she already knew. This part was inevitable. Across the room, her laptop remained open, the system still active but quiet now. No alerts, no urgency, just a closed loop. Case progressing. Exactly as it should. Scarlett walked into the kitchen, pouring fresh coffee. The small routine grounding her in something simple. Real. Not manipulated, not taken. Just hers. Her phone buzzed again, this time a different message. From Madison. Scarlett paused for a moment before opening it. I'm sorry. 2 words. Nothing more. No excuses. No explanation. Scarlett stared at the screen, her expression unreadable. Because for so long, she had waited for those words, imagined them, needed them. But now, they didn't carry the same weight, not because they weren't real, but because they came too late to change anything. Scarlett didn't reply. She set the phone down again, letting the silence sit where the message ended, not out of anger, not out of punishment, but because some things didn't need a response. They just needed to exist. Across the city, life continued. People moved, Cars passed, everything normal, everything unchanged, except her. Because for the first time, she wasn't reacting to her family. She wasn't fixing their mistakes. She wasn't carrying their consequences. She was simply living. Adrian's name appeared again on her phone, this time a call. Scarlett hesitated for just a second, then answered. "You okay?" His voice came through, calm, steady. Scarlett looked out at the skyline and the lights shifting gently across the buildings. "Yes," she said, and she meant it. A small pause followed. Then Adrian spoke again. "You handled this better than most would." Scarlett let out a quiet breath. "I stopped trying to be who they needed," she replied. Another pause. But this one felt different, not heavy, not uncertain, just open. Scarlett turned slightly, her reflection meeting her own eyes. Because now, she understood something clearly. She hadn't lost anything that mattered. She had only let go of what never belonged to her in the first place. And in doing so, she didn't just survive the betrayal. She finally reclaimed a life that no one else could ever take from her again. 6 months later, nothing looked the same. And yet, everything finally felt right. The Manhattan skyline stretched endlessly beyond Scarlett's window, just as it always had. The same buildings, the same rhythm, the same quiet hum of a city that never waited for anyone. But inside her apartment, there was peace. Real peace. Not the kind that comes from silence or avoidance. The kind that comes from knowing nothing is being taken from you anymore. Scarlett stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee, the morning light resting softly across the marble counter. Her movements were unhurried now, no longer shaped by pressure or expectation, just intention. Her phone buzzed lightly, a notification. Final case update. She picked it up. Marcus Cole, convicted, multiple financial crimes. Sentencing confirmed. Scarlett read it once, then locked her phone. No satisfaction, no celebration, just closure. Because this was never about watching him fall. It was about restoring balance. Across town, life had continued for everyone else too. Madison had disappeared from social media completely. No more posts, no more curated life, just quiet absence. Her mother, alone, disconnected from the world she once controlled so easily. And Scarlett? She wasn't chasing anything anymore. Not validation, not approval, not even justice. Because she already had what mattered. Her space, her clarity, her life. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Scarlett walked over and opened it. Adrian stood there, less formal now. Still composed, but something in his presence had shifted. Lighter, more human. "Thought I'd stop by," he said. Scarlett stepped aside. "You early?" He smiled faintly. "Oh, you're finally slowing down." That made her pause, because for the first time, that was true. They moved into the living room, and the quiet between them comfortable, not forced. Adrian glanced around. "Feels different here." Scarlett nodded. "It is." A small silence followed. Then, "I was thinking," Adrian said carefully, "maybe we could get out of the city this weekend." Scarlett looked at him, not guarded, not uncertain, just present. "And do what?" she asked. Adrian shrugged slightly. "Nothing complicated." A pause. "Just something real." Scarlett held that for a moment, then smiled. Not the controlled smile she used to give. Something softer, something earned. "I'd like that," she said. And she meant it. Because this time, she wasn't stepping into something out of need. She was choosing it. The city continued moving outside, unchanged as ever. But inside, everything was different. Because Scarlett Vaughn had lost nothing that truly belonged to her. And in the end, that made her stronger than anything that had ever tried to break her. Because she didn't just get through the storm. She built a life where no storm could ever take her peace away again. So, the story has come to an end. And let me ask you something. Are you still here with us right now? Because if you are, then maybe something in this story touched your heart in a quiet way you didn't expect. Maybe you saw yourself in Scarlett. Maybe you remembered a time when you gave too much, trusted too deeply, or stayed silent just to keep the peace. And if that's true, I want you to take one thing with you today. You are allowed to stop. There's a powerful idea in ego philosophy that says, what you tolerate, you teach people how to treat you. And healing begins the moment you choose differently, not loudly, not dramatically, or just clearly. Scarlett didn't win because she fought harder. She won because she finally saw the truth and stopped betraying herself to keep others comfortable. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. If this story stayed with you, even just a little, go ahead and like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes, the moment you choose yourself is the moment your real life finally begins. This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, emotional reflection, and educational storytelling purposes. All characters, names, events, and situations are imagined and are not based on any real individuals or verified real-life cases. While the story explores realistic themes such as family conflict, trust, personal boundaries, and consequences, it does not represent factual events or actual investigations. Any resemblance to real persons, living or deceased, is purely coincidental. The purpose of this content is to share meaningful life lessons and emotional experiences in a dramatic format that encourages viewers to reflect, grow, and connect. Viewers should understand that this is a work of fiction designed to inspire thought and conversation, not to present real accusations or factual claims.